Hi, I'm Bill Brown, a professor in Xiamen University's MBA program and academic director of the Global One MBA program. And my wife, two small sons, and I moved to Xiamen in 1988 and became Fujian province's first foreign permanent resident in 1992. Actually, I had no interest at all in China until I was 20, because as a child, we never studied Chinese history or culture. So I wanted to go anywhere in the world except for China. But in 1976, the US Air Force sent me to Taiwan. And during my 2 years there, I fell in love with the place and the people. And when I learned that 3/4 of Taiwan people's ancestors came from the Chinese mainland, I determined that someday I'd go to the mainland to learn more about the ancient nation's history, culture, and language. I left Taiwan in 1978, but my unswerving dream was to go to the Chinese mainland, right up until 1988, when we moved to Xiamen. It took 10 years because after the Air Force, I finished my master's and PhD degrees, and I also started a company to help cover tuition costs and to save money to study Chinese in the Chinese mainland, and to be able to afford my new wife, Susan Marie. I was 32 when we moved to Xiamen, and I had already lived in 30 places. Chinese President Xi Jinping said that he had 缘分, fate, with Fujian, because he lived here for 17 and a half years. I think that our family also had 缘分 with Fujian in Xiamen. In 1988, Xiamen University was China's only university that would allow a foreign student to bring a spouse and children. So we really had no choice but Xiamen. And 缘分 reared its head again right after we landed in Xiamen. I had planned to stay in Xiamen only 1 or 2 years for Chinese study. But after my second month, I learned that Xiamen University was one of the first places in China to start an MBA program. And their only foreign teacher had just quit. When they asked me to replace him, I agreed to help for 1 year, and then 2, and then 3, and now it has been 33 years. I never imagined being in one place for so long. But since my teens, I had wanted to do something to help a poor country develop. And China seemed to have the most hope of lifting the most people from poverty. Throughout the 1980s, I had read China Reconstructs magazine, which is now called China Today, and seen the country's determination, even though it was such a historically unprecedented task. But China's economic development needed international business. So to be able to teach graduate business in China was a very strategic opportunity. I could not imagine doing anything with more potential for helping to eliminate poverty. And the longer I taught, the more I thought, why leave? But even though both Sue and I were excited to be in China, living conditions were not easy after such a comfortable life in Southern California. Water was out almost every day, sometimes for 3 or 4 days. So I built a large water tank on the mountain for our entire building to use. Electricity was also unreliable. I used to carry candles to the store so I could see when the lights went out. We were really shocked when Xiamen University told us we had to eat in the cafeteria but could not use cash, only ration coupons. Where do I get coupons? I asked. They solved the problem within a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, Chinese teachers shared their rations coupons, saying they had more than they needed. And we naively believed them, only to learn much later that they themselves had very little. But they shared it anyway. Who would not fall in love with such people? I could not have imagined then that our sleepy little island town would just over a decade later win international awards for being one of the most livable cities on earth. I was really honored to represent Xiamen at an International Livable City contest in Germany in 2002. I shared such facts as Xiamen being China's first city to give daily air quality reports, and its innovative ways to balance growing and greening. In one 20-year period, we were number 1 in economic growth and number 2 in greening for cities in our size category. Judges were amazed, and we won the gold. One of the 6 international judges said, Xiamen is not only number 1, but number 2 is far behind. He also added, I had no idea that China had cities like this. I was so proud. Of course, I learned it wasn't just Xiamen that was head and shoulders ahead of the rest of the world. Over a decade, I helped over a dozen Chinese cities win gold, including Shanghai Songjiang, Nanjing, and Beijing Dongcheng. And thanks to modern transportation and the Belt and Road Initiative, the whole world is now at Xiamen's fingertips. Our first trip from Los Angeles to Xiamen took over 50 hours on 3 planes, followed by an 18-hour boat ride up the coast from Hong Kong. Today, Xiamen Airlines flies direct to Los Angeles in 12 hours, or direct to Amsterdam, or direct to Australia. I imagine someday we'll have direct flights to the space station. This was something I never dreamed of in 1988. But I also never dreamed that not just the rich coastal cities, but even the remotest inland cities, towns, and villages would transform so completely within mere decades. In the early 1990s, foreigners criticized my articles about China's improvements. You've only seen the coastal cities, not the impoverished inland areas, they said. So I bought a large 15-passenger, high-ceiling Toyota van, and my wife, 2 sons, and I traveled around Southeast China, and in '94, we drove 40,000 kilometers around China, the coast, then to Beijing and up to Inner Mongolia and west through the Gobi Desert to Tibet, and back to Xiamen through South China. It took 3 months, and it was exhausting. The roads were terrible. In one place, we were stuck 3 days when rains washed out the national highway. But we were so blessed by the people we met. It is true that they were poor in places like Ningxia, Gansu, and Guizhou, but the people were friendly and hospitable, and we could tell they had hope. Even then, the government was building roads in such remote places that I could not see how they'd ever recover the cost. I slowly realized it was like the old Chinese saying, give a fish, feed for a day. Teach the fish, feed for a lifetime. So China created an infrastructure to help Chinese, even in remote areas, lift themselves from poverty. This bold strategy succeeded for 2 reasons. 1, China's visionary and skilled leaders. And 2, hardworking people who seize the opportunities provided by visionary leadership. After all, it is useless to teach people to fish if they refuse to fish. I just published a book, Chasing the China Dream, about my 40 years of observing China's fight against poverty. I interviewed dozens of people across China, from national and local leaders to farmers, fishermen, and laborers. I was amazed and even moved to tears by the stories I heard. These people are my heroes. People like Lin Zhengjia, who had only 4 years education, was so poor he did not wear shoes until he was a teenager, and he studied Kung Fu to give himself confidence. But as he engaged in back-breaking labor digging tunnels, he thought to himself, I could do this better. So he gathered a team, started his own company, and today he has built almost 100 tunnels, including the world's highest in Tibet and China's first undersea tunnel in Xiamen. And Madame Yang Ying, whom I've known 25 years, a poor farm girl whose dream was to earn 20 yuan a month as a Xiamen University professor's maid. She achieved that dream, then started Xiamen's Inside School and Xiamen International School with its award-winning IBM program. And today, she also has international schools in Beijing and Shenzhen, as well as vast real estate holdings, a biotechnology company, and she has given hundreds of millions of yuan to fight poverty, improve rural education, and support the elderly. She is my hero. And there's the Mongolian mother who 3 decades ago was in abject poverty, but thanks to roads, now makes traditional Mongolian snacks and sells them to tourists for enough profit to send her daughter to my own Xiamen University, and then to graduate school. She is my hero. I have hundreds of Chinese heroes, ancient and modern, and I hope someday to write about them all. In 1992, I applied for permanent residence in China because I had been telling my students that the greatest opportunities ahead were in China, not overseas. But most did not believe me. And the few who did believe me felt that the really great opportunities were still many decades down the road. I realized that the only way to convince young Chinese that the future was in China was for me to commit my own life to staying in China. So I applied for PR just to prove I believed in China's future. When I first applied for PR, I was told foreigners could not apply. But I explained that I had read the Chinese laws and it was, in fact, allowed. I was then told there were no forms. So I made my own form. After the third application, I was asked, "How many times are you going to apply?" I answered, "Only until you accept me." I was finally approved in 1992. When students asked me why I had such confidence in China, even when it was still so backwards in so many ways, I explained it was because I know history. And most of all, I have confidence in China's fifth great invention. In the 1730s, English politician Eustace Budgell said that everyone knew of China's great inventions, but all nations admitted that China excelled most at the art of government. Good government gave China stability and also wealth. 300 years ago, China and India accounted for 2/3 of the world's GDP. Sadly, China was almost destroyed by nations engaging not in moral trade, but opium trafficking, gunpoint, slave trading, colonialism, etc. But since 1949, China has proved to the world that it still excels above all nations at the art of government. Over the past 3 decades, I've watched Chinese ascend the ladder of leadership just as their predecessors did 200 or 2,000 years ago. They first prove themselves academically, and then they're given a local position like young Xi Jinping when he was Xiamen's vice mayor. He was then sent to Fujian's Ningde, one of China's 18 poorest counties. His own mother worried for him when she saw mountainous Ningde's poverty. But he simply said, "At least the scenery is good." He worked hard to raise Ningde from poverty and eventually became Fujian's governor, which is when I first met him. He did well in Fujian and was promoted on to Shanghai and eventually became president. After watching China's leadership, I've come to appreciate how efficient government can be when there is one party united in meeting the needs of the people, rather than multiple parties whose goals are not the people, but their own party's power. China achieved precision poverty alleviation only because it has precision government. And because it has precision government, my wife and I returned to China from a US visit in March 2020, even though the media made it look as if China was overrun by COVID-19, because we were confident that a precision government that could lift the world's largest population from absolute poverty could also defeat with precision a pandemic that has defeated the rest of the world. 30 years ago, I had confidence that the future was in China. After China's dual victories in 2020 over absolute poverty and over COVID-19, my confidence is greater than ever. And more than ever, I hope the world will learn from China. Our planet is small, but we have great global problems: desertification, poverty, global warming, urbanization, aging population, pandemics. The list is endless. And for years, China has taken the lead in tackling most of these because China tackles problems not with politics, but with science and their 2,000-year-old art of government. When Xi Jinping sent me a letter at Chinese New Year in 2019, he said that he was confident China would continue to prosper and that I would have even greater stories to write. I agree. And not because I'm a great writer, but because China is such a great story. Thank you.